Most people believe that words are the strongest weapon in human interaction. They argue, debate, explain, defend themselves endlessly, as if speech alone could guarantee victory. But the truth, the one Nietzsche understood, is that the world is not moved by words alone. The world bends to something older, deeper, and more unsettling. Presence. Think about it. The instant you walk into a room, before you have said a single word, you have already declared something about yourself. The way you stand, the way you breathe, the weight of your silence. It all communicates. People feel you before they hear you. And often what they feel shakes them more than anything you could have said. Nietzsche once wrote that the greatest events are not our loudest, but our stillest hours. It's in silence, in stillness, that the true battle begins. When you choose not to fill the air with noise, you force others to confront themselves. Your calm becomes their chaos. Your silence becomes their discomfort. They begin to wonder, why isn't this person trying to impress me? What do they know that I don't? Without effort, you've unsettled them. This is the power of presence. It does not rely on arguments. It does not need to explain. It simply radiates an authority that others instinctively recognize. And the more desperate someone is to prove themselves, the weaker they appear in contrast. Presence exposes insecurity without you having to lift a finger. Jung would later describe the persona, the mask we wear to meet the demands of society. Most people cling to that mask, terrified of what lies beneath. They adjust it constantly, polishing it, begging for it to be accepted. But the one who has mastered presence wears the mask lightly. They are not enslaved by it. They can remove it at will, because their strength does not come from performance, but from depth, and depth cannot be faked. Think of the great figures of history. Marcus Aurelius, sitting in silence among his soldiers, needing no grand speech to command respect. Or Gandhi, who disarmed an empire not with endless arguments, but with a stillness so profound it made violence look like noise. Their silence was not emptiness. It was a weight, a force, a declaration stronger than shouting. Presence is not passive. It is not weakness. It is the ability to hold your ground while others scramble to fill the void. In a negotiation, the one who breaks the silence first reveals their need, and need is weakness. The one who can wait, who can breathe, who can remain still in the heat of conflict. This is the one who already holds the upper hand. Nietzsche would call this the will to power, not the crude domination of others, but the mastery of the self, the discipline to resist the urge to explain, to defend, to prove. In that restraint lies strength, because the one who needs nothing cannot be manipulated, and the one who cannot be manipulated cannot be defeated. You don't outsmart others by overwhelming them with words. You outsmart them by refusing to play their game. While they perform, you remain grounded. While they shout, you remain still. While they reveal themselves, you reveal nothing. And in that nothing, in that calm and dangerous silence, you carry the weight of presence. So remember this: words are cheap. Anyone can use them. But presence is costly. It requires solitude. It requires self-mastery. It requires that you face yourself so completely that you no longer fear what silence might reveal. And once you've done that, once you've paid the price of that inner work, you will carry into every room a kind of power that outsmarts without speaking, defeats without fighting, and silences without saying a word. You may believe that intelligence lives in the mind alone, that cleverness comes from sharp words, quick arguments, and brilliant comebacks. But Nietzsche would remind you of something far more primal. Long before we learned how to speak, we already knew how to communicate. The body has always spoken louder than words, and it still does. Stand in front of someone and watch them closely. Their lips may lie, but their posture rarely does. Their tone may try to convince, but their eyes betray them. You can tell when someone is insecure, not by what they say, but by the way they fidget, the way their shoulders collapse, the way their hands search for something to do. Weakness leaks through the body like a crack in the mask, and strength, true strength, radiates the same way. Nietzsche believed that instinct governs us more than we admit. Civilization is just a thin layer, a mask over the animal spirit. And the animal in us still reads the world, through signals, through posture, through stance. You don't convince people with logic alone. You convince them by embodying a force they can feel but not name. When you sit with stillness, when you hold your ground with quiet certainty, when your gestures are deliberate rather than frantic, you are speaking to the unconscious of everyone watching. They may not understand why, but they feel your authority. The irony is that most people give themselves away. They leak energy constantly, like a poorly guarded secret. They avoid eye contact. They speak too quickly. They smile when they don't mean it. They fill silence with empty chatter because they cannot endure the weight of stillness. And in their effort to hide insecurity, they reveal it completely. Their body becomes a confession, but the one who has mastered their body masters the room. Imagine walking into a space where everyone is rushing to be noticed, where nervous energy bounces off the walls, where words overlap into meaningless noise. And then there you are, silent, shoulders steady, movements slow and deliberate. You don't have to announce yourself. The announcement has already been made. Your body has spoken. Nietzsche called life a battlefield of wills, a contest of strength. And on that battlefield, the body is the first soldier. You don't win with words. You win with presence that radiates through every gesture. Think of the way great leaders stand, not with frantic movement, but with stillness that commands attention. Think of warriors, philosophers, mystics. They did not need to speak constantly because their posture already declared who they were. The body is also a mirror of the psyche. Jung would later say that the persona is the mask we wear for others. But the body does not lie as easily as the tongue. If your mind is restless, your body shows it. If your heart is fearful, your stance betrays it. And if you are centered, grounded, and at peace with yourself, the peace becomes magnetic. Others feel drawn to it without knowing why. There's a reason silence paired with stillness unnerves people. It forces them to feel their own chaos. Your steady presence highlights their lack of control. Suddenly, their gestures feel exaggerated, their speech too fast, their laughter forced. They sense the contrast. And in that contrast, you have already outsmarted them without a word. The trick is not to imitate dominance, but to embody authenticity. If you try to fake power, your body will betray you. Tension in the jaw, stiffness in the shoulders, awkwardness in your stillness, it will all show. Real presence is born not from pretending to be strong, but from dissolving the need to pretend at all. Nietzsche would call this the cultivation of inner strength, the will to power turned inward. When you master yourself, when you no longer need validation or applause, your body naturally reflects it. Picture the difference between two people. One enters a room loud, animated, desperate to be seen. Their words are fast, their body restless, their laughter exaggerated. The other enters quietly, sits calmly, and says little. Yet all eyes drift toward the quiet one. Why? Because we are drawn not to noise, but to gravity. And gravity cannot be faked. It must be earned through the work of self-mastery. Your body is not just a vessel. It is your first language. It announces your energy before your mouth opens. It tells people whether you are anchored or lost, whether you are in command of yourself or enslaved to your nerves. To outsmart without words means to master this language, to let your stillness, your deliberate gestures, your calm breathing do the speaking for you. Nietzsche once wrote that every deep thinker fears being understood too quickly. The body ensures that. People may not understand you consciously, but they feel something, an unease, a respect, a quiet fascination. They lean toward you without knowing why. That is not manipulation. That is the natural authority of one who has mastered the unspoken. So remember this: words will always be debated, but the language of the body is immediate. It bypasses reason and strikes the instinct. And instinct, far more than logic, governs human behavior. To win without words is to let your presence speak in a language older than speech. It is to stand so firmly within yourself that others feel it in their bones before their mind has caught up. This is how you outsmart without uttering a syllable. You don't overwhelm with arguments. You overwhelm with gravity. You don't scatter yourself with restless movement. You anchor yourself with stillness. You don't reveal desperation in speech. You reveal depth in silence. Your body is your first truth. Let it speak with mastery, and you'll discover that outsmarting others isn't about clever words at all. It's about embodying a force so steady, so undeniable, that everyone else reveals themselves while you remain untouchable. Silence is not empty. It is not passive. Silence is a mirror, and that is why people fear it. The moment you choose not to speak, not to fill the air with nervous chatter, not to rush to prove yourself, you hold up that mirror to everyone around you, and most people cannot stand what they see. Think about the last time someone fell silent in your presence. Maybe it was during an argument. Maybe it was in a conversation where you expected a quick reply. That pause, that refusal to react, didn't it make you uneasy? Didn't it force you to question yourself? You see, silence is not neutral. It is an active force. It destabilizes. It exposes. And Nietzsche understood this better than most. He believed that human beings wear masks not just to hide from others, but to hide from themselves. We are terrified of facing the shadow inside, the chaos, the doubt, the vulnerability, and silence rips the mask away. When you refuse to break it, when you let silence expand, you force others into confrontation with their own shadow. They start to hear their own insecurities echoing in that empty space. They project their fear into your stillness. They imagine judgments, criticism, superiority, all because you said nothing. This is the paradox of silence. It says more than words ever could. It whispers into the psyche of the other person, stirring discomfort they can't quite name. Some will grow defensive, some will try harder to impress you. Others will retreat entirely. But all of them will feel the weight of your silence. Nietzsche's philosophy of the will to power is often misunderstood. It isn't simply about domination. It is about self-mastery first. And silence is one of its highest expressions. To remain silent when you are provoked, to stay calm when others are frantic, to hold stillness while someone else spirals, that is strength. It is the refusal to be pulled into their chaos. It is the discipline to let them unravel without joining them. But silence is dangerous. Dangerous because it exposes. Dangerous because it does not let people hide behind noise. This is why so many rush to fill the void. They joke. They explain. They justify. They overshare. Anything to cover the discomfort. Yet in doing so, they reveal themselves more fully than if you had interrogated them directly. Silence becomes the trap they fall into, and you never had to push them. The shadow of silence works because human beings crave validation. When you withhold words, you withhold approval, and this unsettles the fragile ego. People begin to second-guess themselves. Did I say something wrong? Do they disapprove? Am I being judged? The silence forces them to confront the fact that their sense of worth is externally anchored. And in that confrontation, you see them clearly. Nietzsche would remind you that this power is not about cruelty, but but about truth. Silence is not a weapon to humiliate others, but a force that reveals what is already there. When you hold it with intention, you give people the chance to face themselves, and most cannot. That is why they feel outsmarted, outmaneuvered, outplayed, when in reality they were undone by their own shadow. Consider the moments in history where silence shook the world. When Socrates paused before answering, his silence made his words unforgettable. When Gandhi sat in stillness, refusing to react with violence, his silence carried more weight than armies. Or even in your personal life, think of the teacher, the leader, the figure who didn't need to shout. Their silence made you pay attention because it pulled something out of you. The shadow of silence also applies inward. Can you sit in silence with yourself? Can you endure the absence of noise, of distraction, of constant validation? Most people cannot. They fill every quiet moment with screens, with voices, with anything to avoid meeting their own shadow. But Nietzsche would tell you, greatness is born only when you pass through that silence, only when you stop running from it and learn to face the darkness it reveals. So to outsmart others without speaking, you must first learn to outsmart yourself in silence. You must learn to hold it, not as absence, but as power. To let others project their fears into it while you remain unmoved. To let silence stretch until they reveal everything you never had to ask. This is how silence becomes strategy. And yet, it is not merely a tactic. It is also transformation. Because when you master silence, you no longer chase validation. You no longer fear the shadow, yours or theirs. You stand in presence, anchored, while the world trembles at the mirror you hold. So the next time you are tempted to fill the void with words, remember this: silence is never empty. It is full of truth, full of power, full of shadows waiting to be revealed. And if you can master it, if you can stand still while others crumble in their need to escape it, you will already have outsmarted them. Not by arguing, not by persuading, but by showing them what they could not bear to see. Everywhere you go, people are playing a game. They smile when they don't feel joy. They nod in agreement when their soul is screaming no. They laugh a little louder than the joke deserved. They are not lying outright, but they are not telling the truth either. They are wearing masks. And Nietzsche saw this for what it really is: survival. Human beings have learned to perform, to play a role, to keep the mask in place because to drop it feels too dangerous. But here is the secret. The moment you step outside that game, the entire structure begins to collapse. When you refuse to wear a mask, or when you wear yours lightly and without effort, everyone else feels exposed. They begin to sense the falseness of their own performance. Your silence, your stillness, your refusal to over-explain, it highlights their act. And nothing unsettles a performer more than being reminded they are on stage. Nietzsche called it herd morality, the way society pressures us into sameness, into masks that protect the group rather than the individual. To belong, you must behave, you must conform, you must speak in acceptable ways. But the moment you refuse, the moment you decline to participate in the endless performance, you gain leverage. Because now, you are not trapped in their game of appearances. You have rewritten the rules simply by not playing. Think of the countless conversations where people are locked in competition for attention, each one speaking louder, telling a bigger story, fighting for the spotlight. If you step back, if you choose not to compete, you shift the gravity of the room. Suddenly, all that effort looks desperate. Suddenly, the masks feel obvious. The one who speaks least but carries presence becomes the anchor, while the rest spin around them like restless satellites. This is the true game of masks, not to wear the most convincing one, but to see through them all. To recognize that words are often camouflage, that gestures are often rehearsed, that much of social life is theater. And once you see that, once you recognize the performance for what it is, you are no longer deceived. You can outsmart without saying a word because you understand the script everyone else is clinging to, and you refuse to follow it. Nietzsche admired those rare individuals who lived beyond the herd, who carried themselves not as actors, desperate for approval, but as creators of their own stage. For them, the mask was not a prison, but a tool. They could wear it, remove it, change it, without being enslaved by it. That is what presence is. The ability to move through the game of masks with freedom, while others remain trapped in roles they cannot escape. History gives us countless examples. Look at Diogenes, the cynic philosopher, who mocked social conventions by refusing to wear the mask of politeness. When Alexander the Great stood before him and asked what he could do for him, Diogenes said simply, "Stand out of my sunlight." No flattery, no performance, just presence. And in that refusal, he turned an emperor into just another man. Or think of the mystics, the saints, the revolutionaries who unnerved entire societies not by shouting louder, but by stepping out of the performance altogether. When you stop playing the game of mass, you don't just outsmart individuals, you unsettle entire systems. You remind people that the roles they've been playing their whole lives might not be real. And once they sense that, they either cling to the mask with greater desperation or begin to unravel. This is why silence is so disruptive in the game of masks. The mask depends on response, on reaction, on participation. If someone jokes and you don't laugh, the mask cracks. If someone brags and you don't validate them, the mask weakens. If someone lies and you don't argue, but simply look at them, the mask trembles. Because your refusal to participate reveals the emptiness behind it. Nietzsche warned us that most people are not ready to live without masks. They need them. They cannot bear the raw exposure of authenticity. But if you are willing to carry yourself with authenticity, if you are willing to stand still while others perform, you will always appear as the stronger presence. Not because you shouted, not because you argued, but because you revealed the hollowness of the stage. To outsmart without words is to step out of the performance. It is to recognize the play of masks and to refuse to lose yourself in it. Others will reveal themselves as actors, desperate to be believed. And you, by not playing, become the only one they cannot outmaneuver. And here is the deeper truth. This is not about humiliating others. It is about freedom. Freedom from the endless need to wear the right mask, to be accepted, to be applauded. Nietzsche's call was for the individual to become sovereign, to stand apart from the herd, to live in such a way that you no longer fear being seen as you are. When you reach that point, your silence alone becomes disruptive. At the deepest level, the question is not how to outsmart others. It is how to transcend the very need to prove yourself. Nietzsche's vision of power was not merely about winning arguments, not about silencing opponents, not even about dominating a room with presence. His vision was something more dangerous, more liberating, more eternal. It was the cultivation of a life so rooted in inner strength that you no longer needed to play games of cleverness at all. Quiet power. The kind that does not beg to be noticed, yet cannot be ignored. Consider the paradox. The less you speak, the more every word matters. The less you reveal, the more people long to know what you conceal. The less you fight for approval, the more authority you naturally radiate. This is not strategy. It is transformation. When you stop chasing validation, validation begins to chase you. When you no longer fear silence, silence becomes your ally. And when you no longer seek to outsmart others, you become untouchable, because your very being outsmarts them before they begin. Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch, the one who creates values instead of obeying them, was not just a call to rebellion, but to sovereignty. To live in such a way that your presence alone is disruptive, because it does not bow to the usual scripts of society. Imagine that, walking into a room not to dominate, not to manipulate, not to impress, but simply to be. And yet that very being unsettles everyone, because it carries a weight they cannot match. That is quiet power. Think of the contrast. Most people speak endlessly, hoping their words will fill the emptiness inside. They argue to defend their fragile sense of self. They shout to hide their fear of being unseen. But the one who has cultivated inner silence has no need for this noise. They can sit in stillness while others crumble. They can withhold speech until it carries the weight of stone. They do not fight for attention. They draw it without effort, because power is never in the noise. It is always in the gravity. Quiet power transcends cleverness. Cleverness plays games. It tricks, manipulates, deceives. But quiet power does not need to. It is not interested in the games at all. And this is why it wins them. When you refuse to play by the rules of insecurity, the insecure cannot touch you. When you no longer chase applause, the crowd has no power over you. When you stop measuring yourself against others, comparison dissolves. You have already outsmarted the entire arena. Nietzsche knew that to live this way is not easy. It demands that you first confront yourself, that you face the silence you fear, the shadow you run from, the masks you cling to. Only then can you embody the kind of presence that unsettles others without effort. Quiet power is earned. It is forged in solitude, in discipline, in moments where no one is watching. It is the weight you carry into the world because you have carried it first in yourself. And this is the ultimate outsmarting, not of another, but of your own weakness. Outsmarting the part of you that craves constant reassurance. Outsmarting the voice that fears stillness. Outsmarting the hunger to prove, to perform, to persuade. Once you have defeated that enemy within, no enemy outside can touch you. History remembers the loud, but it is shaped by the silent. The generals shout commands, but it is the silent strategist who wins the war. The politicians fill the air with promises, but it is the quiet philosopher whose words last centuries. The masses make noise, but the one who walks alone in silence often changes everything. That is the paradox Nietzsche saw, that real power is not loud, it is quiet, and because it is quiet, it endures. So how do you transcend through quiet power? You stop seeking victory in noise. You stop needing to outsmart everyone around you. Instead, you cultivate such mastery of self that your silence, your stillness, your presence speaks for you. Others will try to decode it, some will resent it, many will be unsettled by it. But none will be able to ignore it, because in a world addicted to noise, the one who masters silence becomes unforgettable. This is not about arrogance. It is not about aloofness. It is about freedom. Freedom from the games of masks, freedom from the addiction to validation, freedom from the fear of being misunderstood. It is about becoming so rooted in yourself that the world's noise cannot shake you. Nietzsche's philosophy was never for the faint of heart. It was for those willing to carry the burden of becoming who they truly are, even if that means walking in silence while the herd shouts around them. And so we arrive at the final truth. You do not outsmart people for the sake of defeating them. You outsmart them by refusing to be trapped in the same prison. You outsmart them by remaining free. And the one who is free, the one who has no need to perform, the one who carries quiet power, they have already won before the game has begun.